Ultimately, our intuition is the strongest ally we have in our ability to accomplish tasks. But what if our intuition is stupid? What if our intuition is flawed? Why does that happen? We have a great survival mechanism, a psychological immune system that lets us drive through and ameliorate negative experiences. We can push through fatigue. We can push through pain. We can push through poor form. That is the only thing that has allowed this very poor armor and predator-lacking weapons to survive and become an apex predator. Our ability to move through a negative experience and not feel any worse also works against us. Because as we push, we can only recall the same level of fatigue. We can only experience the same level of distress. A great study was done at the University of Pennsylvania, testing people on self-reporting sleepiness after 14 days of sleep deprivation. What was interesting is that after the first day and a half, we become wildly inaccurate at self-reporting fatigue. In fact, from day 2 to day 14, we report the same level of fatigue using the gold standard for sleep self-reporting, the Stanford Sleepiness Scale. What's interesting about that is that that psychological immune system is what allowed us to move from day 2 to day 14. It's important for us to be able to move through a long winter or a cold hunt where we get nothing. We need to be able to push through circumstances. But we do that every day, and we do that to our own detriment. And we do it in exercise, where that's become the moniker of gyms across the world. No pain, no gain. You must push through this negative experience. Exercise is not a negative experience. Exercise is a positive adaptation. So when you push through a negative experience in exercise, you develop a percentage of adaptation that is dysfunctional. You become stronger at being worse. We have to check that psychological immune system at the door. We have to check that ego at the door. Ego's great. Small, dense, strong ego can be the only thing that beats a large, big, diffuse ego. We need that psychological immune system, but we don't need it to be in the driver's seat. So how do we check it? How do we restore accurate intuition? Because my intuition was wrong after day 2 of sleep deprivation. It remained wrong up into day 14. I need some type of scale. I need some way of checking the physical exercise that I'm doing to make sure that I'm doing it at a proper level. Self-reporting is always flawed because we're also working against that psychological immune system itself. It's always a filter, but we can practice. We can get better, we can meditate, we can learn to be more aware of when we're pushing through things. And there are 3 ways that we can do it. These ratings of our perception help us quantify if we can remain honest, if we can be candid with ourselves. They can help us rate the performance or execution of a technique, so that we can guide ourselves through a workout without the psychological immune system leading us to becoming stronger, being worse. Negative dysfunction. Number 1, in general, we want to keep the effort at hard but not very hard, because once we get to very hard, then the wheels start to rattle. We want to make sure that if we slide over the edge of optimal effort, which is around a 6 on a scale 1 to 10, 10 being the hardest we've ever worked, when we start moving down to a 7 to an 8, the bungee cord zone, where if we push a little bit harder, the bungee cords are going to snap. But at around a 6, we can bounce back. We can pull back up to the top of the mountain. So are we working hard but not very hard? That's always adaptable. You get a positive adaptation, you can train every day, you don't have to pay the price the next day in soreness, and you have 100% positive adaptation. Next, RPE, rating perceived effort. Next, discomfort. How do I know when the effort is sufficient, but discomfort is low? Because no pain, no gain never works. That moniker was supposed to refer to the discomfort of effort. So you need some discomfort. Nothing ever changes in the comfort zone. So you have to step out of your comfort zone into slight discomfort, but it can't be pain. Pain is acute, it's sudden, and it changes your breathing. You'll know it's pain when you can no longer discipline your breath in the exercise, when you inhale and you brace, or you inhale and you pressurize. So how do you keep yourself in the right level of discomfort? And you think a 3. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst pain you've ever felt, you want it to be a 3, not a 4. And what does that mean? You want it to be uncomfortable, but not slightly painful. And what does that mean? Discomfort is something that you can calmly exhale through, and you've all experienced discomfort, that you can keep your face calm and keep exhaling. Pain is what causes you to inhale and brace. So between a 3 and a 4 is where you want to toggle. Find the right tempo or weight or frequency or complexity that allows you to move at that 3 on a discomfort scale of 1 to 10. And lastly, technique, your rating of perceived technique. How do you perceive your technique? You want it to be very good. You want it to have the least amount of dysfunction. You want to have the least amount of poor technique. On a scale 1 to 10, 10 being perfect technique, you want it 8 or higher. So at an 8, very good technique. You can move down into a 7. A 7, think of as, I have good technique, but there's some things that I could tighten up. There are things I could do better. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough, meaning you have to challenge the chassis. The car should rattle a little, but you should be able to maintain control, executed by your breath. If it comes to the fact that you drop to a 7, the rattling requires some compensation. You're holding on with a death grip onto the steering wheel in order to make sure that the wheels stay in alignment when you're in your exercise. That's when it's good for you to downshift, so that you can continue to work hard, you can continue to keep the discomfort low, and still have very good technique. And why is that important? Because ultimately, if we're honest with ourselves, on a scale 1 to 10, if you train at an 8 or higher, you're still collecting 2s. Out of that scale 1 to 10, 2 is having some unpredictable, undesirable, and probably adverse dysfunctional adaptation or maladaptation. So ultimately, even with this intuitive training, you still need to ramp all the way down, go check out a mobility session, go see how you can move, where have you stored 2s in your body to compensate for the intensity that you've been training. So as a recap, on a scale 1 to 10, 10 being the hardest you've ever worked, keep it around a 6, maybe push it sometimes 7 to 8 as long as you can bounce back. Very infrequently go up to a 10, 100% of your maximum. That's an event, not training. When you have to, drop down to a 4, maybe a 2 on mobility days just to check out where have you been collecting little maladaptations. On a discomfort scale 1 to 10 with exercise, you want to keep it at a 3 or less. You want it to be uncomfortable but not slightly painful. So that means, are you watching your breath? Are you inhaling and bracing? Even that slight inhale and brace has pushed you up in discomfort level. Your physiology is now going to protect itself against the exercise, which is going to create adverse reactions, adverse chains of tension in the body, for which you're going to create dysfunctional adaptation. And then lastly, very good technique. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best you've ever worked, perfect form, you always want to train with very good technique, an 8 or higher, because you're still collecting those 2s, you still have work to do, and very rarely will you experience perfection. So make sure that you stay in your training wave to compensate even for your best performances.